Hi, my name is Rickard Anderkrans. I'm a healthcare analyst at ABG Sundal Collier. So the program continues today. I'm very happy to introduce Henrik Winther, Head of Business Development at Biovica. So without further ado, I will leave the word over to you, Henrik. Thank you very much for participating. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So as mentioned, yes, I'm Henrik Winther, and I'm heading up the business development at Biovica. My background is plus 20 years within the diagnostic and companion diagnostic industry. And I also used to be an associate professor within cell biology at the university in Copenhagen. Today, I'll present status and updates on our efforts in moving our blood test into the clinical routine testing market. And this is about a test to monitor cancer patients' response to therapy. Next slide, please. So let's start by actually looking into the unmet needs within metastatic breast cancer field. And that's because metastatic breast cancer is our first market focus. So from a treatment perspective, the unmet needs that have been identified by patients and physicians and also payers include tools that allow for a faster and a better treatment decision. And that actually also includes tools to identify drug resistance as early as possible, and hence tools to avoid unnecessary treatment, also called futile therapy. And that's, of course, because you don't want to have unnecessary treatment because it's expensive and it also has some side effects. From a monitoring perspective, the unmet needs we have identified there, and by interviewing patients and payers, these unmet needs, they include tools to avoid invasive radiation-based or imaging-based testing, and also tools that will actually reduce the number of diagnostic tests being performed. So what is the Biovica solution to these unmet needs? Next slide, please. Our product, Divitum, it measures the activity of an enzyme called TKA. And that TKA enzyme actually reflects the cancer activity or aggressiveness, you could say. Meaning high TKA levels indicates a very active cancer, not responding to therapy. Whereas low or stable TKA values, they signal a cancer that is responding to the therapy. So our product or test, it works on blood samples, so there's no need for invasive testing. Our test also detects cancer changes or changes in activity in cancer 3 months ahead of what can actually be seen by imaging. And hence, it will allow physicians to early adjust their treatment. So this is, faster and better treatment. And by being better or as good as imaging, our test will actually also reduce the need for imaging. So all these that were actually identified as unmet needs is going to be helped by the Divitum test. And finally, our test uses a technology and a kit format that will suit the routine testing laboratories out there, and therefore fit perfectly into laboratories and hospitals. And even better, behind the Divitum test, there is a massive clinical data. So the next slide, please. These data has actually been established through collaborations with global key players, as you can see in the lower part of the slide here. It's some of the most well-esteemed cancer oncology organizations that have been involved in our work. And it has resulted in 23 publications in high-impacting clinical journals. And the key messages from these journals or papers is that our assay is really strong in prognosing and also monitoring within cancer. So far, our main focus has been on breast cancer, as you can see here. But proof of concept has also been established within gastrointestinal cancer, lung cancer, and other cancers. But let's dive a little bit deeper into the breast cancer study program that we have undertaken. So next slide, please. We started out very broadly within breast cancer, and we have also created results very broadly. But early on, we identified the clear unmet need within metastatic breast cancer, and also with a strong business case within that field, we decided to put our efforts here initially. So the studies we are undertaking within metastatic breast cancer, they focus on all the unmet needs that I mentioned earlier. And it's actually relevant both to current therapies, but also new therapies coming up. Our study program started out as a proof of concept study program, but it has then developed into a strong list of proof of clinical utility conclusions within metastatic breast cancer. And some of the later studies we have obviously used in as the foundation of our 510(k) filing. And it's not the least the SWOG study and also the Lund study displayed here far to the right in this slide here under the metastatic breast cancer activities. And our latest clinical data, they will actually be presented at the world's largest breast cancer conference, the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, taking place next week in US. So from these studies, let's move to the next slide, please. Because there are 3 studies that actually will be presented at San Antonio. And these 3 studies will confirm our earlier study results and hence the clinical utilities that we have identified. But the studies will also add some new knowledge, some new important findings within metastatic breast cancer. So as you can see here, I've tried to illustrate, the different studies, the 3 studies, the conclusions, and, the clinical utility it will impact. So the SWOG study, for example, yes, it confirms again that TKA is a very strong monitoring tool during metastatic breast cancer treatment. But on top of that, we also show that a baseline TKA test is very strongly prognostic for progression-free survival and overall survival. And it's actually very seldomly that you see that kind of data from a diagnostic company, and hereby I mean, progression-free survival and overall survival data. So very proud of that. And also from the SWOG study, it shows that that TKA can show predictive capabilities and then, help physicians in selecting the right treatment right from the beginning. From the palbo dosing study, it was shown that TKA can detect cancer progression 3 months earlier than imaging during CDK4/6 treatment in metastatic breast cancer. So again, we confirm the very early detection of changes in the cancer development using TKA compared to imaging. And in the PYTHIA, which was a prospective trial, TKA is also here shown here to be an early and strong predictor of CDK4/6 treatment. So all these results are, obviously very, very encouraging to us. They're not only supporting kind of the planned for clinical utility of our product, but they are also hinting to an expansion of the clinical utility. And if you expand the clinical utility, you obviously also expand, the market potential. So next slide, let's look into the market potential we have. So what we have done there and what this slide is depicting is that based on national business cases and also some testing impact models, we have estimated the market potential for our 3 first main markets being US, Europe, Big 5 plus Nordics, and Japan. And a few words to the individual markets here. US is of course being the biggest and most advanced trend-setting market, and therefore key to us. It's a big market, but it's also a uniform market, meaning it's a one market access model for the whole model, which makes it a little bit for the whole market. Sorry, which makes it a little bit easier for us. Regarding EU, the Big Five and the Nordics, the CE IVD labeling is just a formality for us because we have that covered. We will then copy paste as much as possible from our US experiences, but making sure to adapt it to country per country market access systems and also the European partners, of course. In Japan, a significant regulatory process will be required. So total market size for US, EU5 and Nordics plus Japan, and with the current clinical utility, approaches $700 million. And here we're not looking into some of the potential other clinical utilities that I just mentioned, coming out of new clinical studies. So where are we with our commercialization process? Please, next slide. Here we display an overview of the commercialization activities and also the status. So from the top, the DiviTum TKa product has been fully developed. And next one, the clinical validation has been completed within metastatic breast cancer. With regard to the regulatory piece, all data and documentation required for a 510(k) clearance have been submitted to FDA. And FDA, they have confirmed, that the application is complete. And therefore, it continues into the standard routine review at FDA. And normally, this has an average processing time of 124 days. However, COVID-19 has put all non-COVID-19 tests on hold. And we have also, entered into that situation. And that means for the next 90 days, FDA will focus on COVID-19 testing. And we just have to accept that. With regard to the commercial partnering, it's running full speed. And we, of course, use our key opinion leader network as DiviTum TKa ambassadors. And I can't reveal details presently, but I have a follow-up slide on our strategy for these partnerships. When it comes to the next bar there, activities to secure product reimbursement and inclusion of TKa into US guidelines. This is also running full speed. And I have 2 slides to provide more details here. So next slide is looking at the commercial partnerships. And we are, of course, building a commercial organization in US, but it is not our strategy to build a huge sales organization. We will strongly rely on our partnerships for sales. Our focus is 71 NCI diagnostic centers or cancer centers. These are the early adopters, and they are also typically trend-setting to other diagnostic labs. And these centers are actually also the centers where we have our key opinion leader network located. So in the middle of the slide here, we are more specifically, currently discussing with major mid-sized oncology labs regarding partnerships. And these labs are typically attached to the NCI hospitals. And also for these labs, very characteristic that they have strong experiences within sales and reimbursement. And therefore, they are really good partners for Biovica. Now, speaking about reimbursement, let's switch to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little about reimbursement and the importance of key opinion leaders. Because I think I've mentioned, both during the presentation of our strong clinical data and also just now regarding the commercial partnerships, that we have a very well-established and unique key opinion leader network, and they are extremely important to us. We simply collaborate with worldwide leading breast cancer oncologists, and they're actually not collaborating with us because we pay them, but because they are strong believers in DiviTum as a tool to resolve the unmet needs within metastatic breast cancer. So very good examples are Dan Hayes in US. He's an ASCO or ex-ASCO president. I think Matthew Goetz, also US, and the medical director of Mayo Clinic, also very, very supportive, and a TK ambassador, very important. And Europe, I mean, someone like Jonas Berg, professor at Karolinska, very, very important key opinion leader network. But actually, all the heads that are up here are very, very important to us. Because these key opinion leaders, as I said, they are our ambassadors, and they are extremely important in convincing both payers and guideline holders and also lab owners in making the DiviTum accessible to patients. So very, very important to us. If we switch to the next slide, and now we are talking payers and reimbursement and testing guidelines. Then I just want to, on this slide, say that the US product reimbursement process is running full speed. And as is also depicted here, it includes several tracks. So number one is, and very important track there is establishing evidence. And that really means that, we generate high impact publications. And those publications are based on completed and ongoing clinical studies, but also publications regarding budget impact. Another track is the payers/insurance companies' engagement or nodding to our evidence creation plans. So they have to say, yeah, makes perfectly sense what you're actually creating evidence-wise. And we start actually by onboarding the early adopters here. And this is, those that kind of accept our current evidence as being sufficient. When it comes to guideline inclusion, a third track, this will be based on the evidence publications just mentioned, and also the use of our key opinion leader network to get into these guidelines. When it comes to the final track, coding, pricing, payment, there we have identified the coding path that we will follow for our product. And pricing-wise, it's going to be value-based, and it's going to be, reflecting our budget impact studies and also our health economic study results. So all in all, we can say that for the reimbursement process, we have moved from strategy into full execution, and so far without any roadblocks. Next slide. If we look a little further ahead, our biomarker actually has a large potential to expand. We are currently only scraping the surface with our first application, and we are only addressing 1% of people living with cancer. So the near-term market expansion for DiviTum includes, of course, geographical expansion, as is shown here, and also moving into other areas of breast cancer. Initially, it could be locally advanced breast cancer, obvious to us, which would even add additional 30-40 potential, or 30 to 40% additional market for us. Another near-term ongoing market expansion include pharma collaborations, and that's actually both early and late-stage drug development, and with late, companion diagnostics. On a more medium term, then our expansion will include other tumor types like lung cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, and prostate cancer. Which takes me to the last slide, which is a summary slide. So I think it's fair to summarize that our assay is, which is called DiviTum TKa. It addresses key unmet needs within metastatic breast cancer. And there's an immediate potential of between 400 and 700 million US dollars for the initial rollout, meaning the initial clinical utility, not the additional clinical utilities we have identified included. And we certainly also can summarize that we have very strong scientific collaborations and evidence behind our test. And as I said, there's a significant potential financially, beyond the initial rollout. Upcoming milestones, yes, of course, the 510(k) approval and then launch in US. We will see that Q2 2021. We'll also have first US product reimbursement in 2021, late. And then also moving into Europe, Big Five, and the Nordics in the end of 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrik. We'll proceed with a brief Q&A session now. So first of all, could you give us an outline or detail a bit more on how you intend the DiviTum to be used in the clinic once it hits the market? Talk a bit, perhaps also if it differs or there are similarities to how physicians are currently working with different biomarkers and tests.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think it's important to understand that, we're talking monitoring. So many diagnostic tests, is a one-time use, and for early detection or just detection in general. But we are actually talking monitoring, which means that our test will be used, several times. It is a monitoring tool. So it is actually going to be a tool that will replace some of the imaging, CT scans, PET scans. That's how we see the first use of our product, and as also shown by the data here, we can see things happening in the cancer before it can be detected through imaging.
As far as I've understand the test will initially at least play a very important role in determining whether a treatment is effective and perhaps that treatment should be shifted. Just looking at the metastatic breast cancer setting, that can be challenging in terms of there being very limited treatment alternatives for the later stage or refractory patients. I guess my question there is, do you see the imminent potential as bigger or more clinical utility from the test in earlier stages of cancer or less severe stages, or how should we think about that?
I mean, there's certainly also options, in the earlier stages. But when we talk, metastatic breast cancer, there are, some, you could say, routine testing established and some routine treatment established. And of course, in Europe, we follow typically what happens in US. And we are actually currently undertaking our studies in a way that we follow the US market and hence being ready for the European market, you could say. So CDK4/6 inhibitors, for example, in US have moved into first-line metastatic breast cancer treatment. And that's why we have focused a lot on CDK4/6 inhibitors in our clinical studies and created the evidence there. We have also looked into endocrine treatment, of course, because that's more the standard treatment currently in Europe, and that's actually our SWOG and our initial clinical validation is the first line treatment, endocrine treatment of metastatic breast cancer patients. So I think we are very well prepared and following closely the therapies within metastatic breast cancer also, and adapting our test to those needs. And it's still the same needs, as I said, both for the current treatment and also for the upcoming new drugs.
That's a really final brief question here. You didn't get to cover it as much in the presentation, but the vertical and the potential within companion diagnostics sounds very interesting and seems to be a lot of opportunities there. Can you talk about how you aim to position DiviTum within that vertical and what opportunities you see there?
Yes. We obviously see, what we know is that companion diagnostics are typically early selection of patients for a specific treatment. But There's also more and more a tendency to, apart from initially selecting the patients, you also want to follow these patients and make sure they continue to have an efficient treatment on this personalized drug. And that's the discussions we currently have with pharma. That on top of selecting patients initially, you also want to follow the patients with a precision diagnostic tool or monitoring tool as Diviton. So that is the discussions we have with the CDK4/6 inhibitors. But we also realize that quite a company, bigger our assay in the very early stages to actually identify drugs.
Sorry, Henrik, you broke up there just in the end. If you could repeat the final sentence just really briefly. Sorry, you have some technical breakups there.
Okay. So just saying that we have identified that pharma partners use our assay also in the very early stage of their drug development for efficacy testing of their drugs. So now we are actually engaging with pharma both in early drug development and having discussions on the later stages, the true companion diagnostics or monitoring diagnostics, as we call them.
Great, thank you, Henrik. And in the interest of time, we have to move on with today's agenda. Thank you very much for taking the time. Wish you the best of luck going forward. Thank you again.
Thank you.